Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Doman Learning monthly question and answer session. This is a once a month webinar that we do here at Doman Learning, where parents join from all around the world and ask us questions about the Doman method and early childhood education and early reading and early math teaching. So wherever you are in the world, welcome. And, please type your questions. Whether you're watching right now on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, you can type your questions in the comments box and we will get to them in order. Now, as always, we're going to take questions first that are pre-submitted by parents in the Doman Learning Parents Facebook group. That's a Facebook group where parents who have signed up for the Doman Learning teaching courses are there. We've got a community there for parents who have enrolled in those courses. So, by the way, if you have enrolled in any of the Doman Learning courses and are not in the Doman Learning Parents Facebook group, please go ahead and join. But I'm going to start with their questions first, and then I'll open it up to the wider audience. So a couple of quick announcements before I get to questions. By the way, this is a 30-minute question and answer, so we've got a limited time. So I always tell people, get your questions in early because sometimes I get a lot of questions at the end and I don't have enough time to answer them all. A couple of quick announcements. So as many of you probably know, here in the US, Thursday is a very important holiday called Thanksgiving. And the day after Thanksgiving is called Black Friday. It's the biggest shopping day of the year. And so my colleagues at Doman Learning have told me that they have organized a Black Friday sale. So all courses at Doman Learning, all of our online courses and materials and bundles are 20% off. So the courses and bundles are 20% off. All you have to do is use the coupon code Black Friday 25. I'm going to be typing that in. So if any of you haven't signed up for our reading before school course or our math before school course, go ahead and type that coupon code in at checkout and you will get 20% off. And I've also got a special link here for the sale that I will be putting in the comments. So if you want to just click on that link and head over to Doman Learning, you can. Give me 1 second while I post this link. There you go. There's the link for the sale. Okay, I'll leave that up for a second. All right, let me get to the pre-submitted questions. We've got a lot of questions here today. So let's start with the first question from Koss. Koss says, our child has started to ask about letters. So just to give you a little background, this is a child who has learned to read with the Doman method and is asking about letters. When she sees text like the island, she points her finger to each letter and asks how to pronounce it. The challenge is that some letter groups don't sound like their individual letters. For example, THE is pronounced the, and the S in island is silent. Exactly, Koss. That's the problem with phonetics, right? They often don't make sense. How should we explain this? Ooh, good question, Koss. Well, I am a big believer that when children ask questions, whenever we can, we should give them answers, right? Because we want to teach them that being curious is good and that learning is fun. So I think that, I would say the most important thing to do, Koss, is when she points at a letter, is to give her the name of the letter. I would focus less on how to pronounce it, okay? Because once we get into pronunciation, it actually, as you point out here, often with a non-phonetic language like English, it becomes very confusing. Like the S in island is silent. So my advice for you would be to say to her, that's the letter I, this is the letter S, that's the letter L, if she's asking for that, right? If a child wasn't asking, I'd say don't give it to them. So I would just tell her, I'll give you the names, but then I would kind of stay away from pronunciation because otherwise it gets kind of complicated. As a child gets older, because I think your daughter is still quite young, Koss, then I think you could start to get into things like, S makes a S sound most of the time, but other times it's silent. But I think for a tiny child, better to give her the names of the letters. Okay. The next question comes from Allison. Allison said, I just purchased your math course. With my 1 year old, I have already taught the quantity cards from 1 to 60, but I never showed any of the quantity cards in order like you recommended doing a couple of times per day. Is that okay? Quick answer, Allison, yes, it's fine. It's true that in the Math Before School course, I do say to parents to teach the cards in order sometimes, and then other times to mix them up, specifically with the math program. But that being said, I've seen parents do it the way you've done it, where they show it all randomly and the child still learns, right? So what you've done is perfectly fine. I think now that you've gotten up to 60, I'd say from 61 to 100, teach it the way that we showed you in the course. I definitely would not recommend you go back and teach 1 through 60 again. I think that would be very boring for your child. All right, I've got another question here from Kos. Kos says, how long should we use a Doman book? How long should we encourage the baby to read the same book before replacing it with a new one? Should we continue motivating her to read it after 5 days? Generally, Kos, the Doman books we will show for up to a week, 7 days. And then usually after a week, we will retire it and add a new book in its place. And usually that's because, with young children, many children will get bored of reading the same book again and again. But there are some children who, especially with favorite books, want to keep them around. So what I always tell parents is, if your child loves a Doman book, you can keep it around longer than 7 days if that's what they want. But otherwise, I recommend after a week retiring it and replacing it with a new book. Hopefully that answers your question. Kos also asks, can we create our own Doman books? The answer is absolutely. In fact, if you've read my grandfather's book, How to Teach Your Baby to Read, you'll notice he calls them homemade books. And we call them Doman books just to keep it clear what the specifications are of the books. But absolutely, they can be made at home. My grandfather called them homemade books. And nothing should stop you from doing that because children love books that are personalized to their interests, their family, their environment. It's a great way to do it. All right, I've got a question here from Building Brilliant Brains who asks, what's the best way to organize all of the cards? Oh, good question. And there's a lot of different ways that I could maybe interpret this question. One way is, how do you organize all the sessions? And the other way is, how do you organize the actual cards themselves? I actually recommend using a file folder. I'm not even sure what these things are called. They're kind of folder holders. I've got one here. Let me just show it to everyone quickly. This is something you often see on office desks. They're there to hold different papers and folders. But you can see here, I've got a homemade book. I've got reading words. I've got math materials, all there being held. I recommend using that for organizing your cards. Hope that's helpful. Let's go to the next question. I got a question here from Jake who says, hi, what are you talking about? Jake, we're talking about early learning, the Doman method form of teaching. Welcome. If you have any questions about it, go ahead and type it in. All right, next question. Allison asks, is it okay to only show a couple of math quantity cards at once? Sometimes this is all my 1-year-old can pay attention to. He gets very distracted with his brother or whatever toys he wants to play with. He doesn't like watching cards very long. Okay, so yeah, is it okay to show a couple of math quantity cards at once? Absolutely. I mean, usually we'll recommend showing from 5 to 10 in a session. And yeah, so hopefully that answer is helpful for you, Allison. 5, maybe 10 cards maximum. But I do recommend, if your child tends to get distracted or bored easily, you can always reduce the number of cards that you show in a session. All right, Kos has another question. Let's see. What about Latin? Since Latin is the root of many European languages, would early exposure help the baby learn other languages later, or is it unnecessary and better to focus on something else? All right, Kos. My first answer to this is pretty personal, which is if I was teaching a child a foreign language, I would prefer for them, if I'm going to spend a lot of time and effort in teaching a foreign language, I would definitely pick a language that they would be able to use conversationally in life. So I wouldn't use Latin. But one of the things that was very helpful that my parents did when we were young was they taught us Greek and Latin word roots. So, for example, they taught us the word root geo, right? Geo means earth, right? So, geo, you see it in words like geography, geology. Interestingly, even the name George comes from the root earth. So, we were taught those, like logi, L-O-G-Y, means study of. Teaching Greek and Latin word roots to children, incredibly helpful. I remember even when I was doing, standardized exams like the SATs and the GREs, knowing those word roots was incredibly helpful. All right, next question. Some people are on YouTube are saying, where are my questions coming from? These are pre-submitted questions from people in our Doman Learning Parents Facebook group. Just to let you know. If you were listening at the beginning, you would know that. Okay, next question comes from, Allison submitted another question here. She said, I never taught my baby the quantity zero. How do I teach that now? And I already taught 2 weeks of addition with my 1-year-old while he was still learning the quantity cards. That's what it said to do in the book, How to Teach Your Baby to Read. Now, do I just finish teaching quantity and then do 1 more week of addition afterwards? Yeah, that's what I would recommend doing, Allison. Finish out teaching the quantities and then restart on addition. And by the way, yeah, for the teaching the quantity zero, which is obviously a blank card, you can do that at any time, Allison. And I think I might mention this in the Math Before School course. I find that when I teach children the quantity zero, it's their favorite. They look at the blank card like, wow, isn't that amazing? The concept of zero kind of blows their minds. So enjoy that. All right. Kos is asking, is there an affiliate link for the Doman program? Good question, Kos. Unfortunately, I don't really know the answer to that. So just shoot an email, Kos, to my brother Noah at hello@domanlearning.com, and he'll be able to help you with that. We do have certain people who are affiliates, but I'm not sure exactly how that works. It's not really my area of our work. All right. I've got a question here from Ginger, who wrote, what are tips for reading to my 9-month-old? She is super distracted. Okay, when you are reading to a young child, very often if you read all the text from a book, they will get bored and distracted. So what I'll tend to do is if I'm reading like a commercial book to a child, I'll read 1 sentence off a page and then point out something in the picture and then turn to the next page, right? So imagine there are 5 sentences about elephants on a page. I would just read 1 sentence like, elephants have a long nose called the trunk. And then I'll point out in the picture, look at that long nose called the trunk. And then I move to the next page, right? And I'll say, elephants are from Africa. Look, there's the continent of Africa. So I'll just give 1 sentence on a page and point out something in the picture. And that allows you to move through the book more quickly, which young children like, but they're still learning from the book. And then obviously as a child gets older, you read more and more in text from the page. All right. Manar is asking about what is the best way to get an infant's attention to the cards? Well, the number one way, Manar, is changing the cards quickly, right? Like, for example, I saw a family last week. I was on a work trip in the UAE, and they were showing a card like this, and they were going, zebra, zebra, look here, look here. They were trying to get the child's attention. And then they went, zebra, look here, look here. And the child was looking everywhere but the cards. And I said to them, listen, just move the cards quickly. I said, try it like this. Lion, lion, elephant, elephant, giraffe, giraffe, moving the cards quickly. And all of a sudden, the baby was locked in because now finally the baby was being taught at the speed they wanted to learn at. So I recommend keep the session short, Minar, and go much faster. Good question. All right. If you have questions on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, go ahead and start typing them in, and I will answer them in order. All right. Koss is asking the gift of knowledge cards. For example, if I have 100 pictures of fish, should I present all 100 in a month or show only 10 at a time? No, because you show only 10 at a time. And by the way, even with the gift of knowledge cards, you don't want to be showing many cards on the same day of the same category. Like imagine if you had different dog breeds that you were teaching your child, right? So you have a set of 10 cards. You don't want to have a second category of dog breeds on the same day and a third category, just because for a lot of kids, it becomes kind of annoying to be learning about the same things, on the same day. So it's better to have variety. So you should have different categories for different subjects. And then when you retire one category of fish, for example, you could replace it with another set of fish. Why show sets of 10 and not 20? It's simply a time thing. Many children will happily pay attention for 5 to 10 cards. They will not pay attention for 20 cards. Now, some parents will say, but my child pays attention for 20 cards. Sure, there are certain children who are like that, but some of the rules of the Doman method are rules that we've made not because they're perfect for every child, but because they're ideal for many children, right? So let's say 20% of children are happy to look at 20 cards, but 90% of children are happy to look at 10 cards. Better to do 10 cards and make sure all the children or 90% of the children are happy and learning than do something where a lot of children aren't going to be happy and succeeding. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. Everyone, we have 8 minutes to take more questions. I've gone through all the pre-submitted questions that came in through the Doman Learning Parents Facebook group. So go ahead and start typing your questions in. I always say to parents, don't wait until the last second, because sometimes as soon as I'm ending the webinars, when I get all the questions coming in. Just to review what I said at the beginning of this webinar, we have a special Black Friday sale. If you purchase any course or bundle at domanlearning.com, if you use the coupon code Black Friday 25, you will get 20% off. All right, I'm seeing if there are any other questions. A lot of good questions today. Very good question here from Allison. Why is the Doman reading course slightly different from the book? So Allison, it's because, my grandfather first wrote the book, the How to Teach Your Baby to Read book in 1964. And of course, there were newer editions that were published. But over the passage of time, we've just realized ways of doing things with our parents that either increase the success of the program or that make it more efficient for families, more efficient, easier, more joyous. So any place where the course is different from the books, I always say to parents, we did that purposefully. Sometimes a parent will say to me something like, hey, you recommend in the course to take 5 minutes between sessions, but in the book it says 15 minutes. Why aren't you consistent? And it's like, no. Like the recommendation of 15 minutes in the book is a very good recommendation. It makes complete sense. But now we recommend 5 minutes because we found that parents are much more likely to complete the program if they take intervals of 5 minutes instead of 15 minutes. So a lot of it is a practicality thing, Allison, where there are just certain things. We were doing it in a way before where we realized, wow, we could make it a little easier on our parents. I also point out to parents that when my grandfather wrote How to Teach Your Baby to Read in 1964, something like 75% of moms were stay-at-home moms, right? So doing something like 15-minute intervals or 5 categories of words at a time was a lot easier and is a lot easier for a stay-at-home parent. But we live in a different age where now a lot of parents doing the program are working parents. Well, all parents are working parents, but you get what I mean. They're going to a job and they only have limited number of hours to teach their children. So we've modified certain rules over time just to make it more efficient and effective for our parents. And Allison is asking, what about switching one category every day instead of one category from every set every day? Very simply, it's just easier for parents. Both ways are effective, right? A child will learn to read whether you're adding one card in each category or adding a whole category and retiring a whole category. But with the way that we've been doing it that I teach in the course, I just find parents find it much easier to be consistent with it because it's harder for parents to keep in their mind, okay, of the 5 words in this category, which of the words is the oldest? They have to write dates on the back of each card. If they forget to write the date, they can't remember how many days that word has been shown. It's just so much more difficult. It's much easier for parents to say, okay, I'm starting this whole category on this day. I'm showing it for 5 days and then I'm retiring it. It just makes life easier on the parents. Good question. All right, everyone. I think we've got time for one more question. If anyone wants to type one in. Whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, you can type your question in the comments box and I will get to it. All right. While I'm waiting to see if I get any more questions, I showed before, if you want to get any Doman Learning courses this week, we have a Black Friday sale. If you use this link for the sale, domanlearning.com/black-friday-landing-page, you can use this link and you should see a clickable link wherever you're viewing this video. And I'll also type it on Instagram for those of you who are watching me there. So yeah, that is the link. And if you use the coupon code Black Friday 25, you can get 20% off on anything in the store. All right, everyone, I guess that is everything. Thanks so much for joining. We'll be back in December for another Doman Learning Q&A. Thanks for joining, everyone. I've got a last question here. Allison asks, how long does it take for kids to learn reading this way? I've taught my 2-year-old for over a year and he doesn't seem to be getting it. Okay, Allison, quick question. Have you been using the Doman Learning materials for that year, or did you start with the book and then started to use the Doman Learning materials? Okay, in answering your question, my first question for you would be, okay, how are you evaluating that he doesn't seem to be getting it? Are you asking him questions? Like, are you asking him to identify words? What I say to parents is, if you're going to do problem solving with a child, right? If you want to get a sense of, is a child kind of getting what I'm teaching? The best way to do it is through choices, right? Where you give options to a child and you say, hey, where's the word car, right? So that's how I would begin with what we call problem solving. And I think I covered this in the Doman Learning course. Now, it's very important to know how to handle these sessions and knowing how to give a child the best feedback possible. Allison is saying, I give him choices and he doesn't seem to know. Okay. Allison, are you showing pictures along with the words? While you're typing the answer to that, I'll just finish on this thought. So the most important thing is when a child answers, you have to give helpful feedback to the child. So if you say, where's the word ball? And the child points to ball, you're going to say, yes, that's right, ball. But if they point to the other choice, if they point to car, you're just in a kind of emotionally neutral way. You're going to go, oh, that's car. Here's ball. Right? So you never actually say to a child, you're wrong, because of course that would make a child self-conscious and maybe make them feel ashamed. We don't want to do that. So you just turn it into a teaching session. You go, that's car. This is ball. And that's the best way to do that. Yeah, Allison says now she is, and she just bought the course. He wasn't super interested without the pictures. Okay, so listen, I think this is the best thing to do. Take one category with pictures and words and teach it 3 times a day for a full week, 7 days. Just one category to start with pictures and words. All right, 3 times a day for 7 days, and then evaluate him with it. So basically, he'll see it 21 times over the course of a week. And then let me know how he does with that, Allison. Like with 21 repetitions with pictures and words, let me know how he does. Remember all the rules. Remember to mix up the cards so he doesn't see them in the same order every time. And let me know. Okay. And if he's still struggling with the new category with pictures and words, let me know. And I'll kind of guide you with the next steps, because I do want to make sure you feel like that he is getting a lot from the program you're doing. He should be. And it doesn't necessarily mean the child should be able to recognize every word they're being shown, but you should be seeing, you should be getting some feedback from him, which is indicating to you that he's at least reading some words. So I want to help you with that, and we'll make sure we get this to a better place. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. We're a bit over time, but thanks so much for joining. And if you've signed up for any of the Doman Learning courses, remember you can join the Doman Learning Parents Facebook group and pose questions there. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.